First, I'll give you the statistic for gun deaths in the United States. And that number in a year is 31,000, a little bit over. Again, it'll be in the links I'll show you. Of those 31,000 gun deaths in the United States each year, over 50%, about 17,000, are suicides. So you can argue all day about whether or not people who want to commit suicide will commit suicide even if they don't have access to a gun. But over half of all gun deaths in the United States each year are suicides. And of the remaining deaths by guns, they don't keep firm statistics on demographics of gun victims. Perhaps they should, but there was a study, and I'll try to find the link for that as well to post, from, I believe it was in Delaware. And essentially what they showed was that when it came to gun violence and gun deaths, more often than not, the perpetrator had a criminal record, and in many cases, actually most cases, the victim also had a criminal past. So we're talking about a large percentage of non-suicide gun death in the United States being criminals shooting criminals. So maybe if that demographic was more well known, maybe we could analyze more whether or not it's an issue of guns or an issue of criminals. And I think that's kind of the argument we're making here. So let's put the breakdown aside and the statistic: 31,000 gun deaths in the United States each year. The number of people each year in the United States who report to have either protected their own life or the lives of others with a firearm every year is over 900,000 people in the United States. So 31,000 gun deaths versus 900,000 people who protect their lives each year with firearms. That number, the second number, the first number is accurate. The number of people who defend themselves with guns each year is actually a ranged value. Some studies, the lowest ones that tend to be the most anti-gun, say 500,000 people each year. The highest one, which attempts to account via surveys with individuals, unreported events where someone defends their life with a gun, meaning no shots fired, they scared someone off so they don't report it, that number goes as high as 2.5 million. So between 500,000 and 2.5 million people each year. The most commonly accepted statistic: 900,000 people in the United States each year protect their lives with firearms. And I think that's important. And I think it's a statistic that speaks for itself. I think all statistics that you will see about gun violence, gun crime, violent crime, I believe they all speak for themselves. So I will link them so you can look and come up with your own opinion. It's not my job to make your opinion for you, but there are too many sources of misinformation, especially in mainstream media, because their job is to sensationalize things for viewership. That is not my job. So I'm going to try and give you statistics so that you can be an informed citizen and so that you can help fight back against these attacks on the Second Amendment. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do, whether you have to pause this video right now or wait until the end, is to write your congresspeople. There are plenty of websites out there. Just Google, "Who are my congressmen?" And you will be able to get the email addresses and phone numbers if you prefer to call, or mail addresses if you prefer to snail mail. Let them know that you will not tolerate and you do not support any further restrictions on the Second Amendment rights of Americans. I think that's really important right now, and I think it's something that has to be done, because once we start, and we've already started to an extent, letting them erode our rights, it won't stop. And if there's one thing that the '94 assault weapons ban showed us, it's that in addition to the fact that assault weapons are used in less than 5% of all gun violence, even then it's completely ineffective. Again, these things speak for themselves. Quickly, I also want to address the idea of need for weapons in the United States. And to do that, I'm going to use a couple of aids, a couple of props here. Okay, this is my Savage 10FP in .308. And most people would consider this a hunting rifle, and indeed it can be used for hunting. I'm not a hunter. I bought this for target shooting. This has not fallen under any ban that I'm aware of, nor is it likely to, unless our rights get eroded going on. But you see someone maybe with a rifle like this, or maybe you look at this and you don't think maybe it looks like a deer hunting rifle simply because, well, of course the telescopic sight is something used for deer hunting, but maybe not the bipod. I built this, again, as a target rifle, so as more of essentially a sniper rifle. And at some point, you may allow the rights to get eroded to the point where people don't need sniper rifles. A deer rifle doesn't need to have a bipod, doesn't need to have a high-powered telescopic scope. Again, You look at someone with a weapon like this, does that make them a bad person? What you know about me from this video, do you think less of me now, seeing me hold this? Let's try another. How about this? This is a Romanian AK74 rifle. Some may call this an assault rifle, but that is an incorrect term because this is not a fully automatic weapon. It is semi-automatic. Fully automatic weapons have been illegal to civilians in the United States since 1986. But this, I also use for target shooting. This is mostly a recreational weapon. Would it fill a role as a personal defense weapon? Absolutely. But I mainly use this for recreation, so is this an unnecessary weapon? We'll get to that here in just a second. What if I add one of these? 30-round magazine. Does that make this weapon any worse? Let's talk about that when I show you my next one. Okay, how about this? Now we're getting into the evil weapons. This is an Olympic Arms AR15. Again, semi-automatic weapon. It is some would call this an M4 style assault rifle, which again is an improper term. So this is where I would like to talk to you about the problem with trying to make the argument of what weapons are necessary in the United States and what was the intent of the Second Amendment. And some will improperly argue that the Second Amendment is intended to protect hunters or sportsmen, or even for the sole purpose of self-defense. And even that is incorrect, because the original intent and the current intent of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution is to protect the American people from tyrannical governments and foreign powers that would threaten the United States. This could also come from issues we've seen pretty recently in our history, like the LA riots, where some shopkeepers defended themselves with weapons like this. And the idea that what type of weapon you have, whether it be a bolt-action rifle or a semi-automatic rifle or a handgun, that somehow makes a difference in the intended purpose of its use or the right of the American citizen to own one is a fundamental problem. So first of all, let's look at the Second Amendment. So I want to make sure that I get this quote right, so I may glance down at it, but the exact wording of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution is, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." And that last phrase, "shall not be infringed," is a critical part of the Constitution. It is the only place in the Constitution or in any amendment where the phrase "shall not be infringed" is used. And that's because it's so important. And I'm going to give you some context quotes from some of the framers of the Constitution, because there's been a lot of interpretation where judges who have their own feelings about gun rights try to interpret the exact wording of the Second Amendment. And even though it's very clear-cut, if, for instance, you think it needs interpretation, then let me give you some context from some of the framers of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson said, "No free man shall be disbarred the use of arms." That seems pretty clear. That doesn't seem like it's a limitation on whether or not you're in a military unit. Patrick Henry said, "The great object is that every man be armed." Richard Henry Lee said, "To preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of people always possess arms." The whole body of people. There is an argument that the first part of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia, limits the scope of who they thought should have weapons. And I will give you some context for what that phrase meant, and it's actually, the meaning of a well-regulated militia is actually enumerated in the Militia Acts of 1792. And a well-regulated militia consists of all adult, able-bodied males in the United States. Not those participating in an organized military unit or even an organized militia unit. All able-bodied men in the United States were considered militia. And I like to think that since the Constitution has since been expanded on the rights of women, that all adult citizens of the United States have the right to be armed. And actually, in the early part of our country's history, there was a requirement that all adult males be armed, and you actually had to register your weapon for the purpose of the government knowing you had a gun. Every adult male had to be armed so that they could be called into the militia. And that is not something that has become obsolete over time. History has shown us what happens when a disarmed populace is at the whims of a tyrannical government. Is it likely that'll happen in the United States in the next 100 years? I don't think so. But that's not the point. If that ever does happen, or if there is another major event, a riot, a natural disaster, where you are left alone to protect yourself because the police and the military are too busy doing other things to help you, you might just be happy that you have a weapon like this that puts you on equal footing with your enemies, because your enemies will always be armed with the best weapons they can find. Mexico has shown us that in the very recent history, some of the strictest gun control laws anywhere, and fully automatic weapon gunfights happen in the streets every day. Better to be protected. I'm going to give you a couple of last quotes here to kind of drive home the point of the intent of the Second Amendment and why it's so important. I want to bring these up here so I can read them, because they're kind of long. Thomas Paine said, "Arms discourage and keep the invader and the plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world as well as property." And Sam Adams said, "The said Constitution be never construed to authorize Congress to infringe the just liberty of the press or the rights of conscience, or to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms." These statements, this amendment to the Constitution, is not interpretable. It is very clear that the intent is for peaceable, law-abiding American citizens to keep and bear arms in defense of themselves, their loved ones, innocent citizens that they may also be around and in charge of protecting, as well as in the, let's hope, unlikely event that a tyrannical government or foreign government attempts to oppress the rights of the American people. So please, write your congressman. I truly hope that if you are a believer in the Constitution of the United States of America, that you will take action to protect your rights and the rights of every other citizen. And furthermore, because I know quite a few of you are actually from other countries or currently reside in other countries, I would encourage you to bring up with your own governments and refresh the idea to them that every human has an inalienable right to protect themselves. And that's not just from home invaders. That's not from burglars. That's from governments and from criminals. So if you are not lucky enough to have the rights that we currently have in the United States, and hopefully will continue to have in the future, fight for those rights. Peaceably and law-abidingly, fight for those rights. I hope this video was informative. I hope you got something out of it. And I hope everything goes well for us as a people and as a country. I'll talk to you guys later.